Hi guys, welcome back to The Learning Gardener. My name is Pip if you haven't been here before, and welcome to my very windswept post-storm garden. Last night I was thinking that I call this channel The Learning Gardener because I am learning and I'm sharing my journey with you guys as I go. I am by no means an expert, but I thought I haven't really shared what I've learnt as a result of gardening. And I thought, let's do that today. I started gardening in 2020 when we were all at home, and I started doing it because I was so stressed out in my healthcare business in Sydney, and I needed something positive to focus on. I needed something that was beautiful in life, and I rapidly became addicted to it. I was always addicted to Laura's Garden Answer channel, but I never really had a garden of my own. I lived on a very, very steep rockery, and it was really hard to grow there because, number one, you had to drag any soil or any cuttings or any rubbish up or down a really steep rocky cliff. Number two, we got heaps and heaps of reflective heat off the rocks, and most things got torched. But the primary problem was I lived where there was a valley below that was all beautiful trees that were filled with white cockatoos, and the white cockatoos it's not like they're eating the plants, they just do it to be annoying. They come in and they cut it off right at ground level, and then they just kind of go ha ha and leave. So all of my plants were covered in netting all the time, which I found really frustrating and ugly, but I still really enjoyed gardening, and it kind of set me off for continuing to grow more and more and look for a different kind of property and a different way to live. By the end of 2020, I was completely burnt out, and I ended up selling my healthcare practice in Sydney and moving to the south coast of New South Wales, where I am now. And that's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. It did take me over 12 months to get over the burnout that I had. It took a lot of time, and gardening was a really important part of actually getting over the burnout and learning to be present again. But along the way, I started to have homestead dreams. I wanted the huge property, the rolling green hills, the massive compost piles. I wanted chickens. I want a cow that I can be best friends with. I want a whole bunch of dogs. I want to be able to create a significant enclosed area that has all these areas for dogs to explore, but is fully fenced in, so my reactive and very terrified dog Birdie can be safe and explore and get that off-leash experience. This is the dream, the homestead dream. But it's not something that I can afford on a single person's income, and who knows if I can even handle that. So what I did was I sold my house in Sydney and I bought here. This house, when I first looked at it, I was like, no way, it needs so much work. And then it kind of sat with me, and I was like, actually, it could be really satisfying to do that work. And it was within a good price range, and better still, it's 3 doors down from my best friend, who I've known since she was 11 and I was 12. So there were some real pros, but there was a lot of work to be done, and I thought, well, let's just give this a go and we'll see how we go. And that, is this garden. What the experience of creating this garden and this home has taught me is that you don't need as much space as you think you do, and there is a real limit to what you can handle as one person, because I know that this house and this property is currently more than I can manage by myself. There's always something that I need to work on. The backyard right down the very back is diabolical. It's a total mess. The grass is long, and I'm just trying to pretend that that's not happening until winter, and then I'll go down and deal with it. But there's a lot that each property needs in terms of maintenance, and in order to do it the way I want to do it and do it properly, it takes time, and it's a lot. It's really a lot. You don't need as much land as you think you do. That doesn't stop me from dreaming about the homestead, but you don't need as much land as you think you do. I grow in a standard backyard size. I live on a 1/4 acre block, and a fairly decent chunk of that is taken up by the house and the deck and driveway and all of those sorts of things. So what I've learned is that you can produce an awful lot of garden vegetables that are going to make you healthier, that are going to taste better, better from quite a small plot. I kept thinking that I didn't have enough growing space, and so I bought extra beds when they were on sale and then forgot I had them in the garage because it turned out that it was already a lot more space than what I thought, and it pumps out so much produce that at times it's difficult for me to handle on my own how much comes out. And like, I don't get every strawberry, not even close. I don't get everything because even if I was here all the time, which I currently am, like the number of beans coming out of this garden is unreal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11. So my growing space is 11 meters by 11 meters, roughly. I know my stride length, when I measure like that, is roughly a meter. So what that means is that including the aisles and the alleys to get in between the beds, I'm using 11 meters by 11 meters. That's not a massive amount of space. Yeah, it's more than what a lot of people are going to have. Yes, I'm very lucky, but it is doable to grow a heap of produce in a small space. I mean, just look at this. This is a tromboncino, although I never say it properly. And this is a squash. So if I harvest this early, I can use this kind of like I use a zucchini, like I need more zucchinis. If I let it fully mature, I can use it kind of like I use a butternut pumpkin, so it becomes a winter squash. And I've increased my growing space by adding some vertical that I'm just noticing now has actually started to tip because we've had a ton of rain, but more to the point, we had like 100-kilometer-hour winds yesterday, and it seems to have shifted the entire thing because the soil is soft. It's unfortunate, and these plants are heavy, and if this collapses, it will be the second time this season that the thing supporting this particular plant has collapsed. But anyway, whatever. But despite the challenges that this plant has, it has produced at least 5 of these that I already had to take in when the first structure collapsed, and it's already got another 5. So this is a ton of produce growing in quite a small amount of space that you could try and do. Sorry, the dog has decided to pee right beside me. You could do this in a very, very small space. This area leads me to the second thing that I have learned. Are you still peeing? Seriously? The second major thing I've learned is to give nature a chance and it'll work it out. As I said, this archway collapsed. The plant was like smashed up and on the floor. I had to remove the squash, and then I created this seemingly faulty structure, and I had to squeeze that in around the other plants that had already matured. This was looking rough, and to be fair, it's looking rough today because of the winds that we had yesterday, but prior to yesterday it was looking absolutely beautiful, and there's no chance that I thought that was going to happen. I've actually started another tromboncino seed because I thought this thing was not long for this world after what it had been through. But you give nature a chance and it works it out. There is a very special plant in my garden, and it's a privacy tree that is a Pittosporum or Pittosporum, depending on how you want to say it. But it has a name, and his name is Crispin Glover. I called him Crispin Glover because it was such a top-heavy plant that every time the wind came, it would smash over, and I came out one day to put him back upright and it lost all but one leaf, and it looked like it was completely dead. But Crispin Glover's made a comeback, so much so that my best friend gave me this little sign for Christmas, and we're going to go and pop it in with Crispin now so that we will forever know which tree taught me the lesson of just give things a chance. Put it in a bigger pot, give its roots a chance to get established, and just try and help it out. The bigger pot has meant that poor Crispin is no longer blowing over in the wind because the pot is heavier. It's also got more space for more soil because the root ball had taken up all the soil in the pot, even though I'd only planted it up 4 or 5 months earlier. But Pittosporums grow really fast, and that's something that I've learned. But my poor privacy tree needs his name tag. Crispin has taught me to just be a bit more patient, give things a chance, and let nature work it out. when you give nature a chance, some pretty incredible things can happen, just like Crispin Glover making a comeback. But also like these amazing kale and the huge broccoli plant behind me. When I planted these seedlings, they were literally the size of my thumbnail. They were so tiny you could barely see them when I filmed me planting them. And I planted them because I had tried desperately to get cool season crop seedlings going, and they just, despite having months in the seedling trays, they never got going. But as soon as I put them in the bed, they took off like a rocket, and you can see my kale plants are the healthiest they have ever been, and they're still going in summer. This absolutely enormous broccoli plant was also the size of my thumbnail, and in the same bed got planted at the same time. We've been having a seriously hot summer, and we had an unusually warm spring. It's still producing broccoli sprouts, which is insane, but I am going to take it out, number one, because I can't get through anymore, but also mainly because it is now covered in aphids. That has finally happened, but it took half of summer to get to the point where this plant, which I'd written off and given no chance, hi bud, had actually progressed to this point. And I mean, just give nature a chance, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, maybe seeds germinate, maybe they don't. Just keep trying and see what happens. If you just keep trying, eventually you'll find something that works. And some years you're going to have an abundance of one crop, and then next year you'll get nothing. Perfect example, spring onions or shallots. Last year I had so many I didn't know what to do with them, so I freeze dried them, and thank God I did. Thank God I have a freeze dryer, because this year got none. The other thing that is a perfect example of that is my pineapple tomatoes. Still haven't had one. Been growing them for 2 years. Last year they got eaten by the parrots. This year, I think there might be a soil disease in that garden bed. Maybe next year. We'll keep trying, we'll work out something different. Something that really worked though is this enclosure for my corn. Any time I have tried to grow corn, the second the kernels start to form, bush rats appear, and there is nothing I can do to stop bush rats, especially when we back onto the bush. But they just eat the whole thing in one night. You come out and they're gone. This year, I got over 30 ears of corn, so that's really exciting. And once it stops raining for long enough for me to do something, I'm actually going to come in here and pull out those stalks, and I'm going to try and plant some more and see if maybe I can get away with another batch of corn. I really should have done it earlier, but it didn't occur to me until I was driving near the corn farms that are not that far from here, and they've only got some little corns at the moment. And I thought, maybe I could get a second batch in, but there is no point in me planting them if they're not in this enclosure, because I won't get them. So I've got some seedlings that are maybe going to get going, and it is maybe raining, so we are going to come under cover. But what I'm hoping is that, as usual, we'll have a hot March, and it might be long enough for me to get a second batch of corn. If it doesn't work, no stress, but it's worth a try. Well, that was a brief but impressive downpour, she says, dodging puddles. Something else that my corn has made me think about is the actual mechanics of gardening. Now, I wouldn't want to have a very tall Birdie's raised garden bed to plant my corn or maybe my tomatoes in, because I don't want to get a ladder out to harvest them. And I visually prefer the look of the lower garden beds. Part of the reason why I budgeted to have the garden beds when I moved in here is because I know that this particular area, both generally and specifically this plot of land, because there is a little stream down the back, the soil tends to hold a lot of moisture, and we can go long periods without getting rain, but as we currently are again right now, we can get a ton of rain and the soil can become very sodden and take forever to dry out, to the point where this year I had to dig up my privacy trees and burn them up before they got total root rot. And when I dug them up, they only had tiny little root balls left. So having a garden bed is an awesome thing if you live in an area like I do, where the soil does tend to really hold moisture. Obviously there are times when you want a lot of moisture in the garden, but you also want good drainage, and that is what garden beds tend to give me. They tend to give me healthier plants because the heavy downpours we get tend to drain through the garden bed a little bit more effectively than if the plants were in the soil. It doesn't mean I haven't had issues with water drainage. Generally speaking though, apart from when we had 1.5 meters of rain in 7 weeks, it's been okay. When I got these garden beds, I was more concerned about not wanting a garden that looked like it had all this corrugated metal in it, and I didn't want it to look, I wanted it to look like a soft, beautiful garden. I didn't want it to look like a hard, kind of, I want to say industrial look. And I wasn't concerned about my ability to squat down and crouch down beside the beds because I used to play catcher in softball. I am very comfortable and very happily balanced perched on the tips of my toes like this. Not a problem, but I do think that if I had to do this all again, that I would incorporate some taller beds. When I was pregnant, I did find it a lot harder to squat for sustained periods beside the bed. I found it harder to reach down into the beds, and generally I was much more comfortable like this. So I do think that there are times, especially when I'm out here all day, that I would really benefit from some taller beds. Especially I can see if you were at your forever property and you're looking at being there for decades. As your body changes, when we experience injuries and things like that, I can really see that there is a time and a place and a cute bird on the archway to think about what you need to do mechanically to make things easier for yourself. So that's something I've learned. I didn't think I would relent and want to have a taller raised garden bed, but I definitely have learnt that raised garden beds for me in this area are the way to go. If I could, I would love to make the most of the fact that our soil holds a lot of water and is quite a good quality soil, quite nutritious. The roses love it here, and it's a good pH. But as I said, we've experienced a lot of root rot, a lot of plant death, a lot of struggle street for the plants that are in the ground, and that's why I've looked at installing archways. The archways are a new addition, and they are not just for the purposes of increasing my growing space without taking up more of the backyard. I'm not actually worried about taking up more of the backyard, although in terms of resale value, people like a lawn. I wanted to keep some lawn so that I could fill the compost bins, and I quite like mowing when the mower is working, which it is currently not, so that's good. But also I think when you grow a garden like this, especially from this midpoint of summer to the end of summer, it can look a bit like a mess. So it is nice to have some visually flatter, more peaceful, emptier areas to break up that look. But adding the archways wasn't just for the purposes of growing pumpkins and things like that, although that was a really big part of it, because I didn't grow a lot of pumpkins last year because I was worried, having had an argument with a black snake in this garden before, that if I had vines everywhere on the ground, that would be a hiding place for snakes, and my dogs are very enthusiastic lizard hunters. That's actually something that they really like about the garden beds. They love tearing around in between the garden beds, chasing each other and hunting for lizards, because lizards have laid eggs all around the garden beds, which is really lovely because there's so many bugs in the garden for them to eat, which has meant that there are now way more birds coming back to this area. And I know that because my best friend's lived down here for 20 years and she's never had so many birds in her backyard and never had so many butterflies as since we put this garden in. So that's really nice. Slight sidestep, but the archways, the idea is then to keep the vines up off the ground, to prevent having a snake pit as a backyard. And the motivation of keeping a snake-free yard is what keeps me coming out regularly and clipping the vines up the archway. I did kind of hope they might do a bit more of that themselves, but that is on me. But I was resistant to putting archways in because I was worried about the shade they would cast. I was worried about how they would look. I don't really like the look of Rio mesh, and I didn't want a rusted archway, and I didn't want all this stuff. It turns out I was wrong. I have learned that garden archways are the best, and if someone wants to give me more Rio mesh to make another archway, then I'm going to say yes, because The rusted look is actually kind of beautiful. It works in nicely with the plants. They're much sturdier and much less hassle than the prettier arbors that have already collapsed on me or rusted through a couple of times. But most importantly, the garden arches add a touch of whimsy to the garden. They're so beautiful. I love watching the plants grow up them, and I just love the way they look in the garden, and I didn't think I would. So for me, it's not so much about vertical growing space. That is a happy side benefit. It's about snake-free and adding a touch of whimsy, and they are beautiful. But you have to be okay with the fact that they're not always going to be beautiful. Sometimes they look pretty scraggly. Sometimes they look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but mostly they're just beautiful. And to be honest, a touch of shade in an Australian summer in the backyard is not the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing that can happen, the loss of a child, is something that I've experienced recently. My son Oliver was stillborn, and that is something that I continue to grapple with on a regular basis. And the garden has taught me that this can be a place of refuge, that you can find a way to numb some of the hurt and the pain that you're going through and release some of the stress by watching seeds grow, by watching birds swoop through the archways, by being present and admiring the beauty of what the world can give you when sometimes you feel like the world is giving you nothing but pain. I am by no stretch saying that the garden has healed me and that I'm over it. I will never be over what happened to Oliver. I will always wish things could be different. But the mental health benefits of being outside, of watching something beautiful grow, of seeing the colors of the flowers and the butterflies and everything, it's so underrated. And I mean, this is the second time gardening in a very short space in my life has helped with mental health benefits. It helped me get over the massive burnout after dealing with COVID in a healthcare business and then selling the business and moving out of Sydney and all of that. And it's helping me again. It's giving me a beautiful distraction, a healthy distraction. It's teaching me so much, and it's allowing me to be present and not always in the grips of grief. The mental health benefits are one thing, but the physical health benefits are something else. I have learnt so much about food, about flavor, about my own autoimmune diseases from gardening, and I have learnt that my body does so much better with food that hasn't been sprayed with anything. I've had blood tests that have been abnormal, but not wildly abnormal, for years, and nothing changes it. And it's kind of been written off as just the way I am because of everything I've been through. I've had cancer, I've got 2 different types of alopecia, and I've had a range of other health issues. And what I have discovered is that I don't have to try and grow all my own food. I just have to eat some food that hasn't been sprayed, some food that has better nutritional value than what I can buy in the supermarket. And my blood test actually became normal quite quickly. So for me, the health benefits, yes, right now I'm leaning on the garden very much for mental health benefits, but in terms of overall health, this is making a huge difference to how I feel physically for so many different reasons, which leads me to the other thing that the garden has taught me, which is preserve as much as you can during summer. Don't put it in the freezer and wait till winter, because I'm lucky to get so much solar from the solar panels that I put in. Down here on the south coast, we don't get a lot of days like today where it's overcast and cloudy. It tends to just be, it's raining or it's not. And I've discovered that I get just a ridiculous amount of power from the solar panels in summer, and so I want to try and make the most of that and cook as much as I can so that in winter I am minimizing my energy usage. But that whole preservation thing is still something I am learning about, and it's been a fun journey to learn how to use the produce you have while it's fresh, while its nutrient value is at its most dense point, and to work out how I am going to eat what comes out of my garden year round. So these are all things that I'm learning and have learnt and continue to be amazed by every day. Final thing I've learnt in this garden in the last 18 months is about what I'm about to do now, which is sow some seeds. With seed raising, I am not a person who will baby my seeds. I tried some indoor lights. To be fair, they were Temu lights, and they did grow well, but the seedlings never really strengthened up once I tried to harden them off outside, and nothing really ever became of them. All the seedlings that I've had success with have done better if I've started them off outside. Sometimes I get the timing right, sometimes I get the timing wrong, sometimes I get the timing right and then a flood comes along. You win some, you lose some. So what I have learnt is that it's better to sow way more than I want. That way, if I lose some, it's not a big deal. I've got more coming through, and I've always got more seeds to sow. If I sow more than I actually need, it works out well. Then it doesn't matter if some die. It doesn't matter if I have too many, because you always think you have too many and you're not going to have room to put them. But inevitably something is always coming out of the garden, or something got heat stroke, probably me, and needs to be taken out. There's always space coming just around the corner. You will always find somewhere to put the seedlings. So what I've learned is that it's important for me to sow more than what I think I need, because sometimes they don't work out. Sometimes I forget about them for a while, and eventually we end up with a nice full garden. It all works itself out in the end. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, let me know below in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow and it helps me make more videos. I'm going to try and make 3 a week and see how I go. But for right now, I've got some seeds to sow. Otherwise, we're not going to have anything in autumn. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.